I really do believe that I would not be here if it wasn't for PICYS. Like, I really, really do believe that. I was a train wreck, and I was not the biggest fan of myself. And PICYS just kept planting seeds. And when I was ready to give life a go, then it was like this beautiful garden just started to grow with all the seeds that had been planted.
Everyone is different with what they need, and PICYS often will try and meet young people where they actually need help. And it's amazing to be a part of a community and find other people like yourself.
It has its place, and it's a very special place.
There's a lot of hidden populations of kids, and they're not the extroverts that are out on the street. And I think PICYS has tried to go out and find those kids as well.
Well, I think PICYS is all about the values and all about seeing people as individuals and part of community.
Meeting other people who have had different lifestyles growing up and seeing how everyone just got along, it was really great.
PICYS was set up to be genuine for people. It wasn't set up as the stopgap, as the you tell me what's going on and I'm just going to play with it. It was actually, you tell me what's going on and I will assist you. I will help where I can. And that's what it was all about.
They don't deserve to be ignored and regarded as flotsam and jetsam and riffraff who should be off the streets and at home or somewhere. They deserve to be part of this community, which means in relationship and feel connected and have opportunity and belonging, not discarded, set aside, walked past.
The Reverend George Davies has lost none of his drive to help Perth's most marginalised youth to feel they belong, more than 40 years after he started working on the streets of Perth. It was the late 1970s, and so-called street kids had begun congregating in the relatively new pedestrian malls.
There were a lot more squats in Northbridge than what there are around now. At the end of the night, we used to go to places like the Suvalaki bar and the Plaka bar and get the food at the end of the night. They used to give us the food at the end of the night. We used to do a lot of scabbing, obviously, you know, for food and whatnot. I was also a street-based sex worker back then as well. We used to work at the park, which was really quite well known, Bungee Park, Russell Square. And I was very sick when I was living on the streets. You know, I was also, you know, I wasn't eating the healthiest, and I ended up, I had scabies because we were, you know, sleeping in squats.
It was suggested to George that the churches should try to address the issue.
And I said, good idea, but others found out about it. The YMCA, Young Australia League, Rotary and so on. We ended up with 20 different organisations sitting around, and I knew about detached work, and I gave a talk about how we can go about this is to have volunteers from amongst our organisations to spend a few hours a week each and see if they connect with young people and do the research from the ground up.
It soon became clear there weren't enough places in the city for young people to meet for recreation.
A lot of the kids used to hang out in the Hay Street Mall or down near the railway station, or go and try and get into the nightclubs or that sort of stuff in Northbridge.
If they sat outside Hungry Jack's, are you ordering? No, oh, sorry, you can't sit here, but where? Adults have got pubs and clubs and restaurants, young people, the street, and that's seen as a problem.
Not long afterwards, George received a generous offer from a city centre businessman.
Hairdresser in Murray Street near William. He said, look, 2 rooms behind me have become vacant, and I'm happy for them to be used by young people who said, we want somewhere to meet. So their idea was somewhere to meet. We weren't imposing some hierarchical plan.
The rooms became known as the Cave and were a popular drop-in centre for young people with nowhere else to be. Sally Hyam helped to run another drop-in centre at the then YMCA building in Murray Street.
This is the door where the kids would enter. We would open at midnight. There used to be a light, actually, that we would turn on. We'd say the door's open,
And then they would come in, and we had the drop-in facility down the back of the building. The cave, prior to the YMCA's operation, operated further down off Wellington Street, and it was a kind of drop-in centre. It was heavily patronised by Indigenous young people who, when the cave closed, they would come to us. It's beautifully lit now, but when we were here, it was a very dark and dingy place, and it didn't go through. So it was a dead end. And, you know, over time, lots of things would happen in these kind of alleyways that we would rather didn't happen with the young people. Our offices were actually these windows here, and then there was a big space that had pool tables and some mattresses and things, and the kids could stay till dawn, and then at 6 a.m. we'd kick them all out and they'd go wherever they were going.
George was living near the beachside suburb of Scarborough, where another drop-in centre for young people had been operating for a few years. It was called The Place. His chance encounter with a homeless young woman would lead to the rudimentary beginnings of a housing network for displaced young people, which continues today.
She was a streetwise young woman. And we said to her, look, we've got a spare bedroom. I was sharing with two guys, single, church house, spare bedroom or two. She was good friends, streetwise, good friends at the beachfront, but three blokes saying, we've got a spare bedroom, caution. So she checked us out. And when she decided after a little while that we were fair income, she went around the squats where young people camp in unused beds and said, you should come and stay where I am. So we got flooded. Bang, bang, bang on the door. Little 14-year-old bloke, can I stay here? Yeah, we got a bit of space on the veranda.
One day a group of Indigenous young people arrived, not wanting to be separated.
And nowhere in the system could cope with 6 that were determined to stay together. And they turned up at our place, and we thought, oh, well, the garage, we made it into a little house. We put in carpet and beds and a wardrobe and made a little house of their own, so then they could come and have meals in the rest of the house. And so we got up to 16 in the place. Then we had 2 more houses in the team that had a spare bedroom, so that it became a little network.
To unwind, George would drop in with friends nearby.
And in that house was this young woman called Peg, and I got introduced. And after a while, Peg said, she'd overheard stuff, she said, I'm moving out from here with my cousin and we'll have a spare room. We'd like to join the network. So Peg joined the network.
I was just meeting George around that time. He was this weird youth worker that lived in a house with lots of people, and I thought, my goodness, I was into saving the world and the environment at that stage, and I worked in a hospital. I wasn't around for Scarborough, but I was around for the waves that came from Scarborough. I met people that frequented Scarborough, and George brought them there, and then they ended up calling in, and then some ended up living with me at various houses that I had. I often said, and I often felt too back in early beginnings, probably when I was meeting George, that it was easy to give money. I was in a professional job then, and it was sometimes easy to give time, but to give my personal space, that was huge. To let people come and live in my house that weren't family and friends, weren't people that I'd known previously, that probably didn't hang the towel up in the bathroom the same way that I did, probably didn't have so much respect for getting food out of the fridge that I might have. That was huge. So that was really sharing my personal space.
Because she would lose her rent every 12 months. Landlords never continued because the neighbour would say, oh, there was a police car or a broken window or a lot of noise or a person who looked drunk. So she never got a lease renewed, 4 places in 5 years.
I looked like a very reasonable person, because I think I was, but then lots of young people would be there, so the lease wouldn't be renewed or terminated early or for whatever reason. So accommodation for me was always tricky.
And the guys I was with, one got married and one moved away to other work, and another fella came, and Peg became part of our little network in that house.
Well, after I'd lost accommodation a number of times and paid out a fair bit of money for excess damage that had been caused by young people living with us because they're never around when you're cleaning up and moving on. I did move in because George was living in a church-owned house. It was in Floreat, so it's a tricky suburb to have lots of busy young people around. But yes, we ended up moving into the same house and getting married. And then, of course, everyone followed us.
Peg and I decided to get married. And we rode our Honda Goldwing motorbike across Australia for an adventure to her dad's little farm on the hills east of Melbourne.
Many of George and Peg's Housing Network volunteers also found themselves working more unpaid hours, escorting young people to appointments or to court.
So we went to the federal government, called at the time Homeless Persons Assistance Program, and said, could we have a 50% social worker to be a backup support to our voluntary network to do the block time thing where half a day is required, to back up our voluntary stuff and be in those situations? And they said, no, you can't have a worker unless you have a house, but we've got $300,000 here earmarked for youth and nobody's asked for it. No one knew about this lump of money sitting in that federal department. So we said, yeah, and Peg had a friend who owned this house and was selling it, and who delayed the sale for 6 months so that we could see if it were possible to negotiate. But they said the money would have to be managed by an incorporated body, and you're just volunteers. So the Youth Accommodation Coalition at the time I talked to, and they suggested Perth Inner City Youth Service. And PICYS accepted it. 6 months trial. We don't usually do accommodation work. We're street work and drop-in centre, but accommodate, we'll give it a go. So they gave it a go. And now this place was owned by the Perth Inner City Youth Service. We filled up with young people. The kids, the young people that we were there, were part of the whole effort of moving. It was their work with us. It was all collective the whole time. It wasn't any hierarchical boss saying this will happen. They brought everything here with us and we set up here.
The result would see 22 Blencoe Street in suburban West Leederville transformed over more than 40 years to become a safe space for young people finding their place in life through the help provided there. It would become known simply as PICYS.
It was a very natural sort of setting and we wanted to maintain that for young people. My involvement was mostly through household network. So household meaning that's where people live or where they don't live. So obviously a lot of young people that we met were literally living on the streets. Some living in each other's lounge rooms, but a lot of them actually literally homeless. So to give people that sort of stability in our setting, because that's where we lived. We didn't go home each night to somewhere other special place. It was quite powerful for young people and quite an attraction for them.
Peg and George lived the experience and they were in up to here, you know, amazing people. And Peg's, you'd go over to Peg and George's place and Peg would have food on the table and always, and everybody would be welcome. So there were this really beautiful, amazing people.
I don't think a lot of people would cope with it. I mean, I've known a lot of Christians, but they are real Christians. You know, they live what they believe, which is just so nice.
The housing network, started by George and Peg, is now coordinated by Maddie Bovell. It offers transitional housing for young people aged between 16 and 25.
We currently have 24-bed capacity in our household network program, and this is transitional housing for approximately 12 months for young people that allows them a safe place for them to stay. And during that time, we offer case management support to help them achieve some of their goals.
Zach runs an art business in Perth and has recently put together a book featuring the works of other Perth artists. He grew up without parental involvement, lived on the streets and was referred to PICYS in 2018.
I was quite young. I was 18 when I was living in PICYS, and so I think at that age for anyone that's where they're trying to find themselves, and so PICYS provided that space for me to do that.
Case management and support can really be quite broad and look very different for a lot of young people. But I guess the way I would explain it is identifying with the young person what their goals are or things that they're struggling with and might need support with, and walking alongside them to achieve those goals. So it could be anything from looking for housing, mental health support, physical health support, assisting them with attending court or getting them linked with a mental health professional. So yeah, it really is very dependent on what the young person's goals are.
Yeah, I think coming into it, and especially quite young, you learn as you go with it all, and yeah, I guess as a great skill to have in life with around all sorts of things. But yeah, I guess budgeting and just general maintenance of the house. Yeah, it was good to be thrown into it. Yeah.
Young people are within the community that they live in. We're not running a congregate care where we put a lot of people together and say there's a big efficiency if we have 20 or 40 or 100 people living in one building and then the workers come to that one building. We're not creating a hostel environment or a lodging environment. We're creating a realistic living environment where somebody can learn to be a tenant with a landlord under the tenancy agreement, and then they can take those skills into their next tenancy.
Andrew Hall began youth work in 1985 and has been CEO of PICYS since late 2014. He's recently overseen a major change in its administration.
So PICYS has been an incorporated association under the law of the West Australian Government for the last 42 years, and we made a decision to change to a company under ASIC so that we had a framework under the national framework. We still hold our charitable status, and we still have all the same objectives and all the same values and all the same mission statement. But what it does allow us to do is to use our resources differently, and it gives us more security in owning infrastructure. And one of the things we're setting out to do is to purchase some properties so that young people we are working with can live in properties that we own. And when we're purchasing them, we're negotiating with the government to match that. So it's our goal to purchase 6 two-bedroom units, which are 12 beds, and if we double that with the government matching it, we'll increase bed capacity by 24.
PICYS also receives significant community donations, which it puts to good use.
We've taken the windfalls from the donors and sort of split them into two categories. One category is we're using half of the money to sort of increase housing stock. So that means we can actually house more young people. We're in negotiations with the government to do a partnership deal where we put 50% of the money in and they put 50% and we buy properties to house young people. The other half of the money is being sort of put into an investment portfolio to sort of help with the long-term viability of the entity. So ultimately what we would like to see is get to a point where we've got an investment portfolio that is generating enough returns to sort of fund the administrative costs of the organization. So that way any money we get from the government can 100% go into service delivery, and we don't have to pay for any overheads out of government money, because government money is hard and we're competing with all other organizations to get it. So if we can actually chop out the overheads from the cost when we're tendering, we stand a better chance of being successful in the long run.
Since 2014, PICYS service contracts have risen in value from just over $400,000 to close to $2 million, with its main investment from Western Australia's Mental Health Commission.
What I am trying to do as Treasurer is ensure that we're on the strongest possible footing when it comes time in 3 or 5 years to renegotiate those contracts, that we can come in and be successful and keep the organization going. We've been around for just over 40 years, and I would like to see us go for another 40 or 80 years. And I want to ensure that by my involvement that I'm leaving PICYS on the strongest foundation financially to continue the good work we do.
Many young people, hundreds if not thousands, have come through the front door of 22 Blencow Street for support. And it's a great house because it's really welcoming. It's got a huge welcoming corridor, so it's a huge welcoming space. And we try to create a whole feel of the house is all about them coming in. So when they walked in the front door, the first 2 doors they walk past without noticing are the offices. So they're literally not arriving at a reception desk. They're arriving into a house, into a lounge room, a welcoming space. From there, they've got the opportunity to gain food and take what they want from the food shelves. No one's prescribing that. No one's packaged it for them. They can take frozen meals from the freezer. They can take frozen meats from the freezer and fresh vegetables from the fridge. And in the access bathroom at the back, there's also a hygiene storage area where people can go in with their own bag and take shampoos, hygienes, deodorants, and things that are useful for them at home, and saving them some money. So our kitchen is a shared space. There's no different spaces for staff kitchen and staff toilets or any of those things. We're all humans. We all share the same space. And young people can come in and make themselves a coffee, make themselves a cup of tea. We always have supplies for people to be able to make ham and cheese toasties and gluten-free toasties with cheese and stuff, so that it's always a supply of food there for whoever needs a feed out of the young people crossing our threshold.
Danny Wright Toussaint is Youth Services Manager for the mental health area at PICYS and, among other roles, assists its landmark psychosocial support service, Pillar, which helps young people at risk of or experiencing homelessness and struggling with mental health issues.
We can start supporting young people from 15 to 20, but we can continue supporting them beyond that age range, but that's our kind of starting age range for our service. And we really do whatever that young person needs to meet their wellbeing requirements. So we will do an individualised support plan that goes through all the areas that they need the most help with.
Jenny Griffiths is a senior clinical psychologist at Perth's YouthLink, a community-based specialist mental health service for young people aged 13 to 24 who have the most complex and severe mental health difficulties.
The Pillar project is a really innovative project, and it's another example of PICY's uniqueness in their approach to a holistic way of supporting young people. So it provides an individualised support approach to those young people, whereby mental health services such as YouthLink, or very typically YouthLink, are working alongside the care that the Pillar group will provide in a psychosocial manner. So it's the psychosocial and the therapeutic being brought together.
The worker would taught me how to do things like boil eggs, and taught me how to do things like prepare basic meals, and to even change a light bulb. So I know to like most folk, changing a light bulb is nothing, but to someone that had never changed a light bulb, that was quite an experience. So, but they helped with like just everyday stuff. I didn't realise until that I was housed in PICYS how much I really wasn't taught, and then how much my caseworker, like my worker, taught me. Taught me a lot.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a privilege to be able to be in the position to bear witness to young people who have experienced some real hardships, but also to be able to sort of give them that leg up to really, go forward with all the best kind of support and resourcing and information and education that they might need to be able to do young adult life as best as they can.
Kirsten Stender worked with PICYS for almost 15 years until 2007 and founded the Pillar project.
Pillar provided accommodation for single people. Could have been in a couple if they chose to, but mostly it was for an individual person living independently. And with that, we employed a specific youth mental health worker that provided unique support, outreach support, which was quite different to what we had for the PICYS household network. There were youth workers there that essentially were youth accommodation workers, but they didn't have the mental health focus, so we were relying on external service providers for that.
Pillar was an outcome of key research which had revealed disturbing findings from young people living in the existing government-run supported accommodation services.
Some of the key findings from that were that young people generally didn't feel safe in supported accommodation, didn't feel safe around other young people, and that meant that they weren't open about their needs and their sexuality or their gender diversity. And from that, we then understood that there was a specific accommodation model that was required to support those young people. So we put together a model where young people could stay in a house on their own, so they didn't have to deal with other young people and the challenges around being safe where they live. So independent accommodation. And then the work is coming in that through PICYS, and PICYS had always been queer friendly, that they felt safe. And we partnered in that with the Freedom Centre, queer youth service, drop-in service. And later days we partnered with Living Proud and obviously YouthLink as the mental health service. So it's a really good, again, another holistic model where young people could access safe accommodation, which was independent accommodation for them, but also the specific services for their need.
And that's really unique to have that positioned within a homelessness youth service. So having that real integration between mental health and homelessness is a very unique and specific service and role that we can provide. And we actually hope that it sets an example for the whole sector.
Andrew Hall, over his years, has worked really hard to develop and expand the Pillar project and been very successful at it, very strategic and hitting the goals, and has achieved an expansion of that. Of course, everybody would love to see it expand more, and for the number of young people it reaches, it's phenomenal.
YouthLink was and is still an amazing service. And in my early days there, we sought out services that could provide the support that we couldn't provide to the young people. The young people that came to us had a pretty tough background and had lost trust a lot of the time for social workers and psychologists. So we were often the first point of contact to re-engage with the support systems that they really needed. So once they realised the support they got from us was actually okay, trusted that, and they found it helpful, we used a trust transfer to the workers at YouthLink who had the more clinical approach and also the appointment-based approach, I guess. And yeah, Jenny and I became, very close working colleagues on many different projects, I guess, and also working with young people. And we set up a semi-formal partnership where we really both, I think, identified that path for young people from the PICYS grassroots model to the more clinical model, typically a year into a young person accessing the support and having them ready to then do their clinical work. But yeah, I think for Jenny was amazing, and she could see how that worked for young people and what they needed.
I think both organisations had impacts on each other. I think that as an organisation, as YouthLink was, that consisted of people who'd come through training such as the discipline of clinical psychology, which was very bound to some fairly tight forms of governance and practice and evidence-based practice. We started to understand and to respect more of the youth work model, which is the way PICYS operated, and to start to see that not losing our boundaries, but adjusting some of our boundaries and being more flexible in how we met with young people. That was a major impact. I think it's been a two-way evolution.
She was the manager at the time, at different times, and so some of the youth workers would do counselling sessions in the park or in a car, or not the formal room setting, and moved into Northbridge eventually. So it was a really great partnership that provided the next step for the young people that we work with.
Not just a counselling thing, it's not just having coffee with people, it's what happens after we've had the counselling appointment, what happens on the weekends, what happens when we reconnect with family, all those things that happen in ordinary lives. It's trying to be around for those sort of examples to create an environment where we can do the remember whens. Because I think that was so important in PICYS in the early days. Oh, remember when we went on that camping trip and we caught all those trout in Lake Lechenaultia? Remember when we went on the camping trip and it rained like mad? Remember when so-and-so went down the river on the mattress? All of these kind of reflections and laughs and sadness and whatever.
There are many young people that when they go into our housing, they're able to really look at improving their mental well-being, so accessing supports, accessing drug and alcohol related supports and reducing or stopping their use, and starting to really do the things that they need towards their recovery in their journey for managing their mental health as well.
Sally Green is the coordinator at YouthLink and works closely with PICYS.
Providing the kind of housing support that PICYS provides, as well as the psychosocial care team approach that they provide, means that by the time the young person is coming to meet with us, often they've already had the experience of people who can affirm who they are, be respectful of who they are able to validate all of the feelings and the struggles that come with beginning to form new relationships with people who are in supportive roles with them, which gives us a much better place to be able to then start to provide the mental health care that we're here to provide as well.
Often up to 50% of the state's youth mental health service young people are also engaged with PICYS at any one time.
We really prioritise young people who are kind of falling through the gaps of other services that might not meet the criteria for some services because of potentially suicidality, drug and alcohol issues are the two big ones that, especially when in combination with general mental health issues and homelessness, can often mean that services aren't able to provide support to them. So we try to prioritise those young people who might be less likely to be able to get support from other services, match them with a key worker and develop from that intake process a individualised support plan that works on all the goals that will address any of the things they need to address for their well-being.
While we're not trying to be parents to them, we are trying to create that sense of unified care for the young person over time. So it's those two people over time with the young person, adjusting to and responding to their needs from within their roles.
Because there are plenty of services where there's time caps on their services, whereas we do it very much based on what the individual's needs are.
People who refer to us from other agencies and community groups are well aware of what happens at PICYS, the way we try to engage. We try to engage with young people as a person rather than for any other purpose, like they're not a student, they're not a patient, they're not a participant in a program, they're a person. And we try to approach everything we do with that way of working and that way of relating. So instantly people can feel comfortable because they're being acknowledged as a person and there's no other expectation on them. There's no other requirement or eligibility for them to have to meet.
YouthLink also offers mental health support to young people with long-term histories of not finding relationships where they can trust or feel safe.
And so in order for us to provide that kind of therapy service for young people, they need to be in a place where they can feel safe and they can build relationships with people they can trust. And that is really where PICYS comes in to support the young people that we engage with at YouthLink.
PICYS and YouthLink refer young people to each other as needed.
We would be referring to PICYS very often to provide that initial stabilisation for young people to be in a place where they can then proceed to engage with YouthLink and improve their mental health.
From its early days, PICYS quickly developed a reputation for welcoming people of different sexual orientations and gender diversity.
Well, I had no idea about gay, lesbian and so on in my early days, no idea at all, although I've have some extended family who are in fact trans and gay and lesbian. But when we started accommodating young people from the beachfront in the early days, some of them were lesbian and gay, and they were persons of value, and beneath their behaviour was an important person. So I started to learn about different behaviours and thankfully they saw that as acceptance, and that grew to be part of not totally the PICYS network, but included in the PICYS network.
So I was having a lot of problems with, my sexuality, and I met the Reverend George Davies, and it was I don't know if turning point's the right words, but meeting a reverend that accepted me as a gay male. Really did change things for me because I wasn't a very happy gay man, well, gay boy back then.
This was always welcome for everyone, literally everyone, and that included gay, gender diverse people, included people, diverse cultural backgrounds, quite a few Aboriginal people as well, people with disabilities. So it was a really all-in approach. And I think from that, it just became known to be supportive and friendly for that. And certainly as PICYS, we participate in early pride parades, we participate in events. Peck and George came along and with the family and dressing up, George dressing up. And, you know, I think that was definitely controversial at the time, but, you know, that's just what PICYS stood for, was, you know, PICYS is there for everyone. And that demonstrated, so coming back to the research that we did, the classes, demonstrating that you're gay friendly is the only way that gay people will actually access your support. So PICYS did that well.
The fact that PICYS has very overtly welcomed and invited young people, you know, LGBTQIA plus young people into their organisation for years and developed a huge reputation in the community, in the queer community, as a safe place, means that young people can go there and they know that they'll be welcomed, they know they'll be respected and brought in and really looked after as community. I think it's been so overt. They've got base camp agenda as well, which is a drop-in time slot specifically for young people with diverse gender and sexuality, and in this case, gender. And I feel that they've done a great service to young people who otherwise might be rejected by family, feel unsafe walking through the streets, be discriminated in spite of policies to protect them in the workplace. I think that PICYS gives them a community where they can really know that they're cared about and they are supported to work towards their goals in very real ways.
Taylor Sewell was helped by PICYS after leaving her home in regional WA when she felt her community wasn't accepting her sexuality.
A bit small-minded, and I came to Perth with just $600. I thought it was going to be enough to get me by. I was a little bit young and naive then. I struggled for a few years without PICYS, in and out of houses and homelessness and just having a really, really rough time. Jumped from service to service, asking for more. They couldn't often provide me with more. Until one time, I think I stomped my feet and demanded a little bit. The manager came in because I was maybe making them feel a little bit unsafe. And he's handed me a pamphlet to PICYS and says, "We can refer you on if you like. I think this place will be where you need." And it was. It was exactly what I needed. I needed more than just to talk about my feelings. I needed somewhere to live safely. I needed food. I needed things I didn't even know I needed, like to learn how to cook, which I still cook to this day. And somewhere to feel a part of something bigger than just myself, a part of a community and surrounded by people just like me.
We were trying to support the sorts of young people that might have been difficult in other places. So back in the day, it might have been if you were using excess drugs or, you know, particularly alcohol, that was one, and heroin. It might have been if you were in the wrong colour, if you were too violent or whatever. But it was where society, you just didn't fit in. So the whole move now to supporting young people of different sexual diversity, huge and really important. I know lots of people say, yes, there's a lot more acceptance now. Not necessarily so, because there's a lot of phobia about it, a lot of fear, a lot of xenophobia about things that we don't understand. So that's really important for PICYS to be in there, to be in places that can be supportive of saying these people are part of our society. They're our brothers and sisters, they're our kids, they're our grandkids. Let's not exclude people just because they're not something that we might understand.
So me and Shannon got married here in October 2024. It was quite a special day for us and for a few people close to us because through PICYS, it was during the marriage equality plebiscite in 2017 for us, and we were a part of the service, and they were huge advocates. And we have one very, very, very special memory of marching with Andrew at one of our protests, and he was there in solidarity, and he really It really made that for us. And it was a special day because we got to get married legally and we fought for it, and people that fought with us were in attendance, and Andrew came along, and it was magnificent. We really earned it.
I think we're very lucky that young people feel safe to come to us for housing here at PICYS, and we do have a high number of trans and gender diverse young people that are accessing our service and our accommodation as well. So I think it's incredibly important that we keep this safe space and that we're able to support those young people, as there really is limited options, and they are one of the populations that are very highly impacted by homelessness.
The CEO decided to stamp the Pride colours at number 22.
2018, the first week of the year, I used to come to work a day earlier than the rest of the staff, and just the year before we'd painted a stall on the front veranda, and we had coloured paints for the young people to paint the stall panels. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to come out and paint the gate and really make it look vibrant and welcoming and reflect our community? So I came out here and painted the gate up before the staff came back to work, and it's been a hit with everybody ever since.
The fence at 22, well, originally there was no wooden fence there. There was just a brick fence which was kind of like almost at waist height, perfect height for people sitting on and chatting and watching the world go by. There was no mobile phones back in the 83, 84. Then we get a little message in the on a note in the letterbox one day saying, look, this is from the woman next door, look, we're putting our house up for sale. Just wondering if you would mind, just this weekend, keeping everybody inside, just so that when people are coming through, because we had lots of young people that probably wouldn't be normally living in this area, and they wanted to get the best possible price. We showed it to everyone in the house, of course. We laughed about it and said maybe for $50 we could all go for a picnic in the hills. But we didn't go ahead that way. They sold the house, and then a few people later, again, someone living in the house said, came out. We got on with this neighbour really well, different neighbour. Obviously the house had been sold, but again, people sitting on the fence, and they paid to put the fence up because they wanted to sell the house, but they didn't want people to be able to see through the fence and see over the fence and to see what was going on. So the fence was actually paid for by one of the neighbours.
PICYS has become a welcome part of the neighbourhood.
I've lived near PICYS for a couple of decades, and on the whole haven't had any problems with it. It's a quiet place in West Leederville. Now, maybe once upon a time there were dramas, but certainly not in the last decade or so. As a neighbour and an interested neighbour, I support what they do. I admire George and Peg Davies for what they've done in this facility and in the area. But on the whole, as a neighbour goes, as a resident, there haven't been any dramas with it. It's it does its job, but it goes about it quietly without many distractions for people in the area.
The current local council is also supportive.
PICYS has been an essential part of the town of Cambridge community well before the town of Cambridge was even founded. It provides essential services to the youth, not just of the town, but also throughout the wider Perth community. The residents know what they do, they know the youth, they know the people who manage the organisation very well. So it's warmly welcomed by the residents, as it is by the town and the wider Perth community.
Taylor has become secretary of the PICYS board.
I'm still learning a lot, and I'm still surprised by how much goes into services like this. And I'm surrounded by amazing people, incredible people on the board who are just doing amazing things and care so deeply. But it's, for me, giving back to the service and the people in the service who helped me become who I am now. I wouldn't be who I am, independent, strong, capable, all of the things that positive things I could say about myself now if I didn't have PICYS. So it's giving back and hoping that the service continues and helping it do so.
Zach is another PICYS success story and gives back to disadvantaged youth through volunteering. In 2024, he was named Volunteering WA's Young Volunteer of the Year for his ongoing work with the Youth at Risk Network, or YARN.
I think just the experience of being able to be present at that ceremony and meeting people who are doing great stuff in the community, volunteering. It was just a very wholesome night, full of a room of great people, so I was just very grateful to be in there. Yeah. The work we're doing is very important, and yeah, hopefully it shines a bit more of a light on the work so that we can get a bit more support to keep it going, yeah.
Now working in community services himself, he also volunteers on the PICYS board.
Yeah, I decided to be part of the board to give back for all that PICYS sort of did for me, and to be able to help influence the future direction of PICYS, to keep it strong and keep it growing the way it has been. And Andrew's a great person to learn from, so being able to work closely with him also benefits, as well as getting to meet and work with now all of the other people on the board who have got their own expertises. So it's just great to be able to give back and learn at the same time.
If you look at the board, we have a lot of different people with a lot of different belief systems, a lot of different ideology. We have some conservatives, some Labour leading, some Greens, but we all agree that the PICYS project in its entirety is a good project, and we will support it in any way we can, because it's about the young people at the end of the day.
The drivers for me in this role have been the professionalisation of the field, the safety of young people, the safety of our workers. So for instance, one of the early things that I pushed for was to get all of our workers to be professionally supervised, because they're hearing unbelievable stories and you can't unhear what you've heard. So they're carrying that around, and there was a huge amount of burnout amongst youth workers in the past, and yet we now see our workers at PICYS don't have that level of burnout, and they've got so much more support. They're getting professional supervision, they're getting supervision through their management, they've got the board behind them and understanding those issues, which I think in the bad old days, there was no understanding of what this kind of work did to us as youth workers, and the trauma and the vicarious trauma.
Initially, we had access to just independent individual counsellors, if you like, to provide those support services to the workers. But we then set up a system with YouthLink that all of the supervision for the staff was provided by YouthLink counsellors, and that was at no cost. So that was a really great saving for PICYS. But it was also people who really understood the service and the model that we were working with. So it was a great support for the staff that were dealing with some pretty hard, long-term, hard and difficult young people.
The sad stories are the things that have probably pushed me away from doing face-to-face youth work. There was one particular time, I think we first started losing people, sometimes suicide, sometimes overdoses. And then there was other times where we lost 2 people within a week, and that was huge. And then, it sounds a bit weird, but our cat got run over the day we heard the second person had died, and I was just holding the cat in my arms. And I said, I've got no emotional energy left to give to this beautiful little pussycat, because it's all gone to people that are no longer there. And a lot of it was drug overdoses, sometimes intentional, sometimes. I think what was so sad for me is that we were trying to provide an environment where people had the best opportunity to be in a space where there was lots of supportive friends, lots of supportive environments, lots of help with dramas that people are in their lives. But it still wasn't enough. And that's sometimes the case. It's still not enough, whatever the situation, because it's too big.
There's so many that have died. Oscar, mid-30s, Oscar died in the square in town under a bush. So sad. Whether it's overdose, another guy who came out of jail, it took him a long while to admit that he'd stolen from us down there at 26. He came out of jail and probably celebrating And illicit drugs are more dangerous than licit drugs. You don't know what they're mixed with, what the concentration is. I'm sure he didn't intend to kill himself at the first night out of jail. He overdosed and died. So there's been a lot of those.
They passed away extremely loved. And, you know, this is something that I do think about with guardian angels. Peg and George would have just so many guardian angels, because Peg and George, to me, are like earth angels. You know, they filled us with so much love. They also, you know, they never gave up on us, and they also encouraged us. They supported us. I now work in community services because of George and Peg and PICYS staff. It was the most supportive family that I was blessed to. So that's how I look at it with everyone that's passed, is they were so blessed, and myself, just having been involved with George and Peg's family and the PICYS family as well.
Coming back into this alleyway actually is a little bit traumatic for me, because there's a lot of loss with young people, you know, that were living in the kind of circumstances they were living in. And we have lost a lot of young people across the years to suicide and misadventure. And I remember them all and honour that, but yeah, it's hard to think of those days and the kinds of things that were often happening for them. And I'm just so glad that organisations like PICYS can be there, you know, when things get rough, and to be a safety net, I guess.
But there are others who connect with the Earthwise community that we met. One chap I met when he was 3 years old, went to the 16th birthday of his son yesterday. Another who I met when he was 3, I did his wedding a month ago, and so on. It's there's been continuity in those ways.
Earthwise was an offshoot of PICYS, started in the early days by Peg and a group of PICYS volunteers and run from an old church in nearby Subiaco.
George used to be associated with the Uniting Church and as a youth consultant, and it was an empty building, and he said never get rid of it because it's a great space. And there was a number of us that were associated with PICYS, staff and volunteers, lots of young people around that had a lot of time on their hands, and staff that were really interested in obviously supporting them and also environmentally. So an op shop was how we started, and pretty soon after that we had a food centre where we bought food from Food Bank, was the only place then. The food was available, and then a lunch. And then 1996 we got a permaculture garden started through a Commonwealth grant, federal government grant, for 6 months. And that's gone on. Everything's still working in more ways than one. It's all done voluntarily, and we get money from the op shop and hiring the building out at the back, and that's enough to pay one staff person, because there's over 50 volunteers, and that's trying to coordinate cats, you know. It's a big job trying to get all the volunteers together.
Frankie was a volunteer with Earthwise in the early days and would bring young people there. She became a PICYS employee and eventually sat on its board.
Well, originally, you know, like the Earthwise and Perth Inner City Youth Service, they were sort of integrated in that young people moved across, and staff from PICYS would be part of Earthwise and come up and bring people to lunches, etc. But, you know, over time, the youth movements moved to become a much more professionalised service, and the government dictates, you know, like what services they want. And so it's become more of a standalone organisation, but still a very powerful advocate for the same group of people, those people who are quite marginalised, who are different, have mental health issues, homeless, all of that time, traumatised. And that they still are great advocates for that young person. And their services are geared around now to, again, supporting them. Yeah.
again with that same philosophy of healing, developing identity and self-advocacy skills, and then really moving on to establish their own small tribe or group that they feel comfortable being part of.
As PICYS grew with more defined management structures, other things started to come into place which were formalised between our two services. So, for example, in earlier days, I was lucky enough to provide supervision to some of their coordinators, which I certainly found a very rewarding and engaging process. We also formalised something that we call a care team approach, where a young person who's known to both services, so they might reside in one of PICY's accommodation settings and see YouthLink, often will lead to the development of a care team, which is a clinician from YouthLink and their youth worker or case manager from PICYS getting together on a regular basis with that young person, holding that young person in mind and at the centre of the process, and looking at what the young person's needs might be, who is best suited to support those needs between the care team members, finding out and very directly with that young person present, are we understanding, are we getting it right? And also providing a sense of containment for a young person who may not have had parents who talk about their own well-being. They may not have had a sense of a parent overseeing what's going on for them.
Because young people come damaged, and often the way they know how to act when they get angry or intoxicated and then angry, particularly usually when people were out of it as well, because if the drugs of choice in the early 80s, heroin was a big one, but alcohol was the cheap one, and alcohol produced a lot of anger and whatever, which could often end up being people damaged, but often the house, you know, the fist through the door or the fist through the wherever. So how we coped was that we just fixed it up and we just paid for it.
People's behaviour comes from somewhere, and that had always been true, what I found there. So people never chose to be who they were. People it had come from somewhere in their past. So yeah, some pretty difficult and crazy times. Never a dull moment, that's for sure.
Number 22 was also George and Peg's home for some years before they moved a few doors away.
Yes, our first daughter was born while we were at the house, and that was a little bit, it was an extra layer. But also at the same time that our first daughter was born, there was a young child born of a 16-year-old girl that had no support at the time, and she was staying with us too, and her baby was born 2 days after ours. I had a husband who was the father of the child. I had a husband that didn't beat me. I was living in a stable relationship. I had supported extended family. What a huge difference. It was gigantic. So around that time there was a number of young babies born. Probably within 12 months there was 4 within our quite local network. So there was also a little bit of trust transfer that goes on because they trusted the way we were doing, and obviously observation. How do we deal with a crying child? How do we deal with no time? How do we deal with whatever? So there was lots of passive learning.
The young people also had to feel like part of a family.
I was looking through photos just before and seeing that we did lots of other things besides living in a house. We'd go on camps, we'd go on outings, we'd do birthday parties. Lots of people had never had a birthday cake, much less a birthday party. So all the things that people might consider normal part of household life, we tried to incorporate in people's lives that maybe they were really deficient in, besides all the other stuff they had going on.
We would have a bang on our door, and ever who was doing it, it was Peg and crew, we would open our door and there would be no one there. That they did knock and runs and fast runs, and then we would look down and there would be 2 paw prints, and what they would be stencils that were powdered. So then the print was lifted and there'd be these 2 little paw prints sitting there, and next to it would be Easter eggs. And, you know, that was just, I don't know, it was beautiful. And then on Christmases, we used to go to like Lake Nationaltia, and there would be like, and Peg's cooking. My goodness, like Peg is one of those people that, like, if she was doing like a chicken and leek pie, everything was basically made from scratch. You know, like old school sort of country cook. And people did used to often joke, because up at Earthwise they would do lunches on Thursdays, that was the only time that I would actually get a nutritious meal when I was using, you know, on the daily. But Peg just put so much heart and soul into everything, even her cooking, like her cooking. She was like our mama.
Of course, there were many challenges.
First day, and I went off to a little workers' co-op that I was involved in Subiaco, Squirrel Nutkin. Got a phone call, Peg, come home quick. And some kids had come home quite out of it, quite drunk. Decided to have a fight together inside, and of course the doors for the side veranda had got smashed. Now normally if you're in a youth service, that's when you get evicted. Firstly, you're drunk and disorderly and you've smashed up a whole lot of the house. Well, we cleaned up the mess. I was pretty pissed off. So it costs money. I can't remember if it was insurance or whatever, but we moved on. So it wasn't an automatic eviction, but it was a growth time. So this was the very first day that we moved into that place. So damage was one part, but not necessarily the total focus of the situation.
Another matriarchal figure in the household was George's mother, who eventually moved in at the couple's new property up the road.
Earlier, late 70s, early 80s in Sydney, and the rest of the family said nursing home. She says, no, I don't want to just be with old people. She sold up, put a granny flat on the back here. She had come over 3 weeks at a time every now and then in our first sort of 2.5 years here to help out.
She brought her own style of discipline.
And little Oscar tore the leg off a chair and was going to beat another kid with it. And she didn't say, you shouldn't, you naughty. She didn't give a lecture. She just went up to Oscar and she said, silly nonsense. He'd never had an 80-year-old woman say to him, silly nonsense. He dropped the stick and she became loved. So when she moved next door, she lived to 104 and a half, died in 2013. But young people would be coming and going. It was who else was in their 100 that they had in their life? They didn't have grandparent contact. They loved, she was grandmother to dozens.
This was how Peg described the early PICYS household network in the 1980s.
It's a lot more than the bed and the food. Each house is sort of organises itself, its own domestics and its own finances, so that if you need or you feel like you want to stay in a house for 2 years or 2 months or 2 days, it's up to you. There's nobody putting the pressure on you to leave, which is often similar to what we'd call the normal household, where you're not pressured to leave when you're 14.
Out of like everything in my life, like now nearly being 50, PICYS is something that I will always look back on as being like, you know, my family that 100% accepted me for who I am.
PICYS has got a good name. You know, it is quite a focal point in the youth industry for being providing a good quality service to young people.
Because I got that foundational support to cover the basic needs, I was able to then work on my emotional needs.
Something in the youth field that is worthwhile, that is being supported, yeah, that's great. Happy about that.
And I'm very grateful that we have this organisation and that we get the support we need.
Yeah, so PICYS has always been a small organisation. I've heard people call it a boutique service. And we, really having that small community space for young people to connect with the whole PICYS community, with staff as well as the other young people going through similar stuff, is what makes us work. It's part of that whole holistic integrated model of service.
But having a huge organisation is in huge danger of losing the personal.
We are individually and collectively addressing things that we thought were huge barriers or limitations and getting past them and having wins together.
When you walk into the PICYS base camp, you are immediately struck by the warmth and the homeliness of that environment. It is as far from the standard clinical building as you can possibly imagine. It is full of love. It comes out of the walls of the building. You can feel it. You can feel George and Peg's legacy in there right from the very beginning. And I would feel so comfortable sitting down at that kitchen table and grabbing a bowl of cornflakes out of the pantry, just as has been happening there for literally decades. So for young people who haven't had that experience of sitting around a family table and sharing a meal and chatting about their thoughts and dreams, PICYS is a place where that has happened potentially for the very first time. And that is a lifelong legacy that you can tell has had a powerful impact on people by the way in which they stay engaged with PICYS and keep that connection both inside of themselves, but also in a very real way by being present at the PICYS AGMs, by being part of the PICYS board, by coming back to YouthLink and letting us know about how important their time with PICYS has been. And I'm sure that PICYS themselves have lots of visitors from people whose lives they've touched over the many years of involvement, who go back and say that PICYS was the first that they ever had that experience of a true family and a true sense of belonging.
I was involved in relationship and I believed in things evolving from the ground up and put together by the participants and owned and not hierarchical. And that's kept growing and growing with people like Andrew and Sally in the chair, and wonderful commitment and continuity of the principles of acceptance, inclusion and growth. So we're pioneers here, if I can still say we. So I feel, proud and appreciative that the principles of being amongst and growing with have kept going. The evolution has had continuity and continuity of growth, and that's boggles my mind. Some friends of mine were in the Hay Street Ball. Everybody was having a ball, getting in the Christmas spirit, reading the posters about life, being it, buying presents for Mama. Policeman come up to a friend of my friend and said, "Listen, son, I do intend to find out how much money you got down there in your jeans, kid. Come on, kid. Now, kid." Well, I tell you, Ossifer, it may sound funny, but I don't happen to have much money because I'm an adult and it's Christmas time and I've got a mama too. Son said, "The cop are going to run you in. We're trying to clean up Perth from sin. And yours is one of the worst kind, looking in the shops, not buying nothing. You ain't no tourist. Down the station, kid. Now, kid." Long time ago was a man called Jesus. I think he started this Christmas business. Said something about love your neighbour, help him along. Don't remember he took no poor one's name and used the law to cause them pain. I think he said, "I'll do the suffering around here." But if he come back again, they'd probably arrest him. So he'd sleep in the shed at the back of the Sheraton. Anyhow, we don't like your kind, because some of your kind haven't got any money, and Christmas is for people with money to spend. Buy, spend. But don't spend it all, because you might get arrested.